Hi, I'm Matt Geiger. My goal is to get you the full, unbiased story on issues, not the liberal story or the conservative story. You can't count on either side to give you the straight story, and I've realized that if I want to find the best solution to our country's problems, I would just need to go out and do the research myself. So that's what I've done to understand climate change. And in this video, I'll go through a moderate's opinion, looking at both sides and doing the research. The problem with climate change is that it's really tough to understand the science behind it. So we rely heavily on the views of experts. Politicians, though, both Republicans and Democrats, seize on this opportunity to misrepresent what the experts stand for and muddy the science to serve whatever means they want. We need to understand what the science is telling us first, and then we can use that to come up with a policy. So we hear about the climate change consensus all the time. There's been a number of studies on the consensus, and to sort of summarize those findings into a couple broad statements, somewhere between 90 and 100% of published climate scientists agree that the Earth is heating up and that humans are a significant cause of it. As you expand the polling net to scientists who are only tangentially related to climate change and haven't published as much, that 90 to 100 range drops to somewhere in the 70s or 80s depending on the group that you're looking at. So just to arm yourself against politician talking points, if a politician says the consensus is a myth, they're just wrong. At best, they're choosing to weight non-experts the same as experts. And if a politician says that there's a consensus that man-made warming is going to be catastrophic for humanity, that's also wrong. That's just not what the consensus is about. So we're trying to interpret these climate scientist findings to figure out a solution. But the problem is more in what the consensus doesn't say. The great majority of climate scientists say that all or almost all warming is caused by man-made CO2 emissions, but there's still a healthy minority who feel it's only a contributing factor. But more importantly, it's still really tough to say either way what the effect from climate change will be on the Earth because we're really in uncharted territory with carbon emissions as high as they are right now. Climate scientists know there's a link between carbon emissions and temperature. It's just that carbon dioxide levels have never gone up this quickly. There are many climate scientists who think that the effects of this will be catastrophic. They say warming will cause the polar ice caps to melt, and this, combined with ocean swelling from warmer temperatures, will put most of our coastal cities underwater. They also say the warmer temperatures will exacerbate droughts and hurricanes, two natural events dependent upon warm temperatures. Meanwhile, our oceans soak up most of the global warming, which could have a negative effect on ocean plant life, which provides the vast majority of the oxygen we breathe. And of course, there's the negative effects to other animal and plant life dependent on certain climate conditions too. But then there are other climate scientists who either think the future is too uncertain to make such catastrophic claims, or even some that think CO2 emissions are one of many factors in climate change, maybe even a relatively small factor. We are truly headed into uncharted territory, and it's just too difficult to say with absolute certainty what'll happen. And then layer on top of that the huge uncertainty over the cost of global change, from an estimate of 20% loss in world GDP each year in one study to a net gain from warming in another study, and pretty much anything in between. So to me, here's what this means. We have an incredible amount of uncertainty, risk, and even though it may not seem like it, uncertainty is a cost. For example, that's why we buy homeowners insurance, even though our house isn't likely to burn down in a given year. There's a cost associated with the mere risk of something bad happening. Right now, everybody, you, me, bears the cost of climate change uncertainty. In an ideal world, and that's an important caveat, carbon emitters would bear that cost, say by needing to buy carbon credits that are freely traded worldwide with an initial cost set by how we value that climate change risk. And by the way, economists are essentially unanimous on the theory behind this idea. What they disagree on is the execution, and for very good reason. I said a worldwide carbon credit system was the best way to go in an ideal world, but we are far from that. A worldwide carbon credit system would be politically infeasible in places like China and India. The problem is China releases twice as much CO2 as the US right now, and could easily increase that many times over as they grow. So what about another solution, maybe carbon credits only in the countries that would accept them, likely the European Union, Canada, and let's assume the US for the sake of discussion. Now, not only are we putting our entire business community at a huge economic disadvantage to China, as if that wasn't enough of a problem already, but we aren't even taking care of the worst carbon emitters of the future. In my opinion, the only way to solve our problem is to get China and India on board, which they won't do for any sort of greater good for the earth reason. They'll switch, and the rest of the world will too, only when it's in their best interest. That means getting clean energy to a point that it can compete on cost with fossil fuels, or developing some sort of breakthrough in harnessing carbon emissions. Unfortunately, the only way is to come up with something that's economically viable in the emerging world. But those alternatives usually don't just magically appear. We need to incentivize those changes, and that means a few things. The most viable option is huge government rewards for green innovations. Things like that have worked in the past to spur private sector innovation, and we should combine this with additional public green research investment. Publicly funded research is usually a bit better at researching huge leaps that aren't economically viable, and private research is usually better at finding currently economical alternatives or applying old methods in new ways. I think we need to be more open to nuclear energy too. Years ago, this was the energy source of the future, but public perception against it has stinted its development as research into other clean energy sources has grown. Finally, and unfortunately least politically viable, we should cut fossil fuel subsidies. If our main goal is the economic acceptance of alternative energy, it's completely counterintuitive to subsidize coal. Again, probably not politically viable though. So here's the bottom line. Crossing your fingers for a technological breakthrough in carbon emission reduction or alternative energies isn't a great solution, but it's the only somewhat viable solution right now. We can't set the laws in China and India, and those countries are causing a significant chunk of the carbon emissions. More than anything though, the starting point needs to be getting the correct information out there. We're still debating things that have been settled because the liars running our government care more about being right than spreading truth. And I'm not just blaming Republicans. Democrats have consistently misled people too, overstepping the realities of what scientists actually know and what they don't. This leads most people to throw up their hands and tune out everything, the real science and the make-believe politician science. Each one of us needs to put our country above the political team we've chosen. If your politician misrepresents the consensus, regardless of which side it favors and where you sit, you each have an obligation to call them out on it. Thanks for watching.